There we are. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Good.
Turn off the big one. Hello.
How you doing, John?
Good. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Hi, Chef. How are you?
Hello. Hey, how are you?
Good. It's Tim and Lynn.
Hi.
It's the Rinkowskis.
That's right.
Right. We're gonna have a fun class tonight. We got a few people in here. Mr. Beam, please do not show me up again. Okay. Wow, yeah, we got a lot of people in class. This is awesome. So, we'll go live on Facebook and we'll get going.
Oh, there you are.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Okay.
Where are the
Who else
bees? There he is. Nope. There he is.
There he is.
Hey, Richard.
This is great. Awesome.
She's
She's puttering.
yeah. Becky's an inveterate putterer.
Hello.
Hi, Becky.
Was here.
Hello.
Hi, Lynn. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
Jen.
I don't think so. Am I muted? I don't.
Okay. So, apparently everyone loves short ribs, which I love to see. I'm a big short rib lover. Let's talk for Jenkins is coming in.
I need the metal tongs.
I'm dubious as an Italian. There's no garlic in this.
You know what? And I'll tell you why, because there's garlic and tomato product in the demi-glace that you have. Now,
Okay.
traditionally, if we were just doing this with like beef stock, like a loose, watery beef stock, we'd add garlic, we'd add tomato product and all that. But with this, it's going to be really rich when it all crunches down.
Okay. And a quick question too. This is I have a lot of fat cap on here. Do I keep it on there?
That's completely up to you. So the short rib fat cap that we left on these pieces, they're going to dissolve nicely and they're going to get very succulent. If you don't like that gelatinous fat, it's easier to cut it off now. But if you do, then like I love it, so I like to leave it on personally.
You know we can't go to spin right now, right?
It's healthy fat. It's good fat.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so let's talk for a minute about short ribs. Everyone's got their oven preheated, right?
What did you say?
What did you say?
Everyone, you all have your oven preheated?
Yes.
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 Perfect. So short ribs are, in kind of that brisket category of being a motion muscle, meaning that there's a lot of interconnective tissue in here. So if you were just to take this and throw it on the grill, it'd be tough. It would be a little chewy. So we do a braising process on it. Now, braising a cut of meat like a short rib takes about an hour and a half. So once we get into the oven, I already went ahead and braised one so I could pull one out at the end too and show you what to do when it's done, because after you guys get yours in the oven, you're going to have a few drinks, relax a little, maybe clean up the kitchen, and then your short rib will be done. So we'll walk through the whole step, start to finish. Now, like I said, a short rib is a motion muscle, so it has all this interconnected tissue. Cuts like this require low, slow cooking to become tender. When you do it right, though, and when you actually make them tender and you do that low, slow cooking, they're unbelievable because all this connective tissue, all this intramuscular fat just melts and dissolves and gives this rich, rich flavor. The other things we have in our meal kit, we have veal stock, red wine, olive oil. Now, I gave you two of them, but you don't need to. It's all based on the size of your pan. You'll see the size of pan I'm doing. Seasoning rub. There's a little red wine vinegar. This we're going to save to the very end when our short rib is cooked, so you could set that aside. And then carrot, celery, and onion. So the basic steps of the process of what we're going to do is we're going to actually brown our meat in the pan, okay? And I'm using a pot this size. So if you see by the size of my hand, it's not gigantic because I'm doing one short rib. And I want to make sure that when it goes in here, there's enough liquid to cover at least half of the meat. And that's kind of the magic to the braise. So using this size pan for me is going to work perfect. I can put it right in the oven. If you're making two kits, 4 kits, some of you I think got 6 kits even, you're going to want a bigger pan, obviously. But for what we're doing today, this one's going to work perfect. And we gave you the liquid accordingly to do it in this size. So I'm going to change camera angles and we can get started a little bit and talk about what we're doing here. All right. Now, this is our short rib. Now you can get short ribs any size, any cut, you know, any way you want. You get them bone in, boneless. I love bone in short ribs, but boneless ones, they're just delicious and they're easy to eat and easy to work with. Now this on top is the fat that we were just talking about earlier. I could do one of two things. I'm going to choose to leave this on. I love it. I think it adds a lot. I think if I'm chopping this to make tacos afterwards or a sandwich or anything, I think it adds a lot to the dish. You can also braise it just like this and pull this off just with a spoon or with your hands after it's cooked. Or you could take a knife and just slice it off right now. Whatever you want to do. You all have about a 10 to 12 ounce cut of short rib. And the reason we do that is short rib shrinks by about 40% when it braises. So that 12 ounce cut by the time it's cooked is going to be way smaller. When we do 8 ounce entree size short ribs for the restaurant, we're cooking 1 pound pieces to start. And that's a result of all the connective tissue and stuff inside this muscle like I was talking about earlier. So I'm going to take the short rib and season it and just set it aside, and then we're going to prep the vegetables.
Season it in here.
So you just want to, you know, get a nice healthy coating of the seasoning on there. Now, if you're worried that you're over seasoning it, remember that as it braises, a lot of the seasoning is going to wash off and go into the sauce. So you're not going to end up with a salty cut of meat, but you also don't want to completely crust and coat it. So if you can see, I have just a nice healthy layer on here.
I think that's beautiful.
Man, you're so good at seasoning. I know, I have a lot of practice. All right. So next up is our carrot, celery, and onion. For each kit, you got a half onion, a whole carrot, which is a little too much. I don't think you're gonna need a whole carrot, even though I love a ton of vegetables in mine. And I'll show you at what point you can add vegetables to it as well. And then some celery.
Can you bring this?
So when you do, say, a bolognese sauce, right? And I'm cutting vegetables for a bolognese, I'm gonna cut them small because they're not gonna cook as long. And you know, I want them to be nice and small and hidden and mixed in with the ground meat. But when I do a braise, I like giant vegetables. I like big chunks, almost like that old school pot roast veal. So the way we're gonna cut these is a little bit larger to make sure that we can still get that consistency. And then when they're cooked, they're gonna be soft and tender and they're gonna flavor the sauce beautifully. So
Do I need to use a whole onion for 2 pieces?
so I use a whole onion because the way we do it, it sweetens it up nicely. But if you don't want to use a whole onion, you don't have to.
Do what you say.
Again, remember, after today, the recipes become yours. You get to steal them. Take full credit. All right, so our celery, we're going to cut nice and big.
Yeah, just with the.
Big for him, like,
Big piece.
is not huge.
And I'm going to use about half of the carrot. So I'm going to cut it in half and then do the same thing. Nice, big chunks. And let me show you what I mean when I say big. I'm talking, if I compare it to like my thumb,
It's like
about
that.
half the size of my thumb.
It's about his thumb.
And then for the onion, I'm going to peel the outer layer on the onion.
I want to watch the onion.
Now I'm going to leave the core intact because this is going to be kind of the glue that holds the whole onion together. I'm going to put my fingers up, take the middle part of my blade, so middle to end. Now on your knife, there's 3 different levels on your knife, and this is always the sharpest part. This is kind of your utility part, your daily chopping, and then this is your muscle. Because your knife moves like this. So they look at the parts where it gets the most contact on the board. It's here and then here. So that dulls the side out more, whereas this side stays nice and sharp for finesse cuts. So I'm gonna have my fingers up and I'm gonna just do one slice about 3/4 of the way through the onion. And then I'm gonna cut this just in half once. And then boom, boom, boom.
Started by cutting the carrot down the middle.
All right. So let me know when you guys are caught up and I'll show you the next strip.
You haven't put them anywhere yet.
Okay, we're with you.
You with me? Okay. So we're gonna go over to the stove, right? And I always have my little portable burner here so that we could all kind of work in unison. And you're gonna want to heat your pan over like a medium heat, but you want to give it enough time to heat up properly because you want it when the short rib goes into the pan, you want to make sure it has enough heat on there to start to caramelize. Now, with any cut of beef, and honestly any cut of meat, what we're doing is we're caramelizing the natural sugars in the blood. So as disgusting as it sounds, there's a lot of sugars and proteins in here. We want to make sure we get the nice caramelization on there. So preheating your pan properly is going to allow you to actually get a great char on there. I'm going to add a little bit of oil. Now, again, you don't need all this oil. You just need enough for a very, very light coating on the bottom of your pan. Because the short ribs do have so much fat naturally that we don't want to oversaturate the pan with oil because then later we got to remove grease and it's a pain in the butt
That's a lot.
when it comes time to eat. To take the short rib and place it right in the pan. And I'm going to let this just go ahead and brown. You guys can all do the same thing and start browning your short ribs.
I don't have much. Okay. I was glad I had this thing heated up. It would have taken 10 minutes. At least it's 10.
So much like when we sear anything else, you're going to see a lot of action going on around the meat. And all this steam and all this vapor leaving, that's what we want. We want that steam and vapor to leave. That's not smoke. Because what it's doing then is it's reducing the amount of moisture in the blood and in the protein, and then that's what's going to make the caramelization happen. Now, you don't want to move this either. Let it sit. Let it do its thing. Because if you start moving it, all that stuff that's caramelizing is going to stick to the bottom of the pan. You're not going to have as great of a short ribs here. And the majority of the flavor of this dish. Now you can see the point it's at right now. I actually want to take this a little bit darker even than it is. And this is a great color. If this was just a seared piece of meat, I'd say it's gorgeous. But because so much of that caramelization is going to dissipate into the pan, I want to let this ride just a little bit longer. And then we're going to flip this and do it on the other side.
Yeah.
What? Hey, Chef,
Yes, sir.
what do you call this cut? Go to a butcher, what would we ask for?
A short rib, a boneless beef short rib. It's also called a plate short rib.
Okay.
But it's an extremely common cut of meat.
Good.
And there used to be a day when this was about $3 a pound. Now it's much more expensive.
Yeah.
But you know, back when I first started cooking, this was a really cheap cut of meat that, you know, you could get for next to nothing. We'd use it for staff meal, for pasta sauces, and then it began to grow in popularity, and the price jumped up big time. Go figure. So you can see, I mean, this has almost that kind of burned char to it, and that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for on my short ribs. And the bottom of my pan doesn't have a ton of oil in it.
Oh, okay. You're not gonna, I can see that. Chef, where should we go to buy a boneless beef short rib?
Where do you live?
Printers Row, about 10 minutes from the pub.
So there's a few different places, you know, if you're in the suburbs, on Harlem and Grand Avenue is International Meats. That's where we get a lot of our meats from. And they can do it, you know, for you. And normally you can call somewhere like Whole Foods too ahead of time. And they can help you, they can get you one as well.
Great. Thank you.
So now I got a sear on both sides. Side number 2 is going to char a little faster because you already have all this goodness at the bottom of the pan. So I'm going to leave the short rib in here. And now I'm going to add the vegetables to this pan. And when I do that, I drop my temperature down too. So I'm going to give a quick little note on this. If you look at this pan, there's a lot of junk at the bottom of it, right? That's what we want. When I add the vegetables, they're going to give off water naturally and deglaze all this on the bottom of the pan. So that's a great sign. All the mirepoix goes in. What I want to do at this point is drop the temperature on the pan down to like a medium heat. And the reason is I don't want to burn these onions. I want to let them slowly, you know, caramelize and get that beautiful sweetness to it. I want the sugars and the carrots to come out. So this is where kind of all the magic is happening. And this is where the sweetness in the dish comes from.
Onions, almost, no, everything, all of it.
I don't know.
They're all in there. I don't think so. You got some onion. If you got carrots, you must have stuff on there.
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't put them all in.
The celery and carrots. That's why it's tough. Yeah, it's all. And then come down. That's the right size pan.
Yeah.
So if I move my vegetables around, they're starting to soften a little bit. The onions are starting to get a little glossy. That's what I want. But the most important thing, if I look at the bottom of the pan, it's a lot more clean than it was a few minutes ago. Because like I said, these vegetables are giving off water and they're kind of grabbing and loosening all that stuff at the bottom of the pan, what's called the fond. And that's great. That's exactly what I'm looking for here. And now this process, you can be as patient as you want with it. You can let this go nice and slow. There's a lot of different variations you can do to it. What I do sometimes is instead of doing celery, I'll do celery root. I've done it with red onions. I've done it with different other vegetables as well that are root vegetables like turnips and rutabaga. You could just continue to build and you know, create these undertones and flavors to whatever you like. But this is the most standard, basic braised combination.
That on. There you go. Okay, there.
All right. So now what I'm seeing here is I'm starting to see my onions break down. And that's a beautiful thing. That's what I'm looking for is I want my onions to have this kind of transparency to it. They're translucent. You can kind of see through them. Like if you go get a Chicago hot dog and it's in a paper bag, looking at the paper bag afterwards, that's how you want your onions to look. I think we can all understand that one. But you'll also see that there's a lot of juice that's starting to form at the bottom of the pan. And that's what we want. That's all the water coming out. That's the vegetables caramelizing. So once I get to this point, I'm going to turn the heat up.
You gotta get on cook. We haven't done that.
Now I'm turning the heat up because I'm about to add the wine. And now when I add the wine into this, I'm just gonna go ahead and pour it in. And unlike normal sauces where in a normal sauce, we take the wine and we wanna reduce it down, we're gonna just cook it until the alcohol smell's gone because I really want that winey flavor inside the short rib. And you'll be able to smell it. So when you're smelling for alcohol, you're gonna put your nose over it and give it a whiff, and you'll feel it burn your nose.
Hey, Steph, we have a question from Facebook.
Yes,
What type of wine are you using?
we're just using a Burgundy wine.
Perfect.
So braises like this, you can use a box Franzia if you want. You know, it's all about getting that wine flavor more than the complex undertones in the wine.
That's the wine.
What's that?
Okay,
Vinegar.
so if I were to take my face and put it not right here on the pot, but up, and I take my hand and I wave this steam to my mouth, I'm gonna be able to smell, you know, the wine. What I'm looking for is if there's alcohol in the wine, you're gonna feel a burning up here in your nose. And you don't want that. You want the alcohol to be gone. So we're gonna let this cook until that burn is gone. And that means that we're ready to add the stock.
More.
Yeah. No.
I'd love it if it was all stock. Okay.
So my alcohol's cooked out. I'm gonna add the veal stock in. And now you can see it's covering up to about halfway, slightly over halfway on the short rib. And now I want to bring this to a boil. If there's not enough liquid, what's going to happen is it's going to steam. If there's too much liquid, it's going to poach. But coming halfway up is going to allow this short rib to release liquid as well and build just this fantastic sauce, but also allow the intramuscular connective tissue to break down as it cooks. So I want to bring this up to a boil, and then I'm going to kill the heat.
Hey, Steph, we have another question from Facebook.
Yes.
Could you substitute with any sweet potatoes or add them?
Oh, absolutely. So if I wanted to add potatoes in general, I would normally wait about halfway through the cooking process just because of how long it takes potatoes to cook versus this. The meat takes a lot longer. If I put potatoes in early, then what's going to happen is the meat is going to get is going to be undercooked and the potatoes are going to be mush, right? Like an old pot roast. So what we'll do is we'll cook about halfway through. We'll stop about 45 minutes in, add our potatoes, and then you're okay to just put the thing right back in the oven. You can do sweet potatoes for sure. Sometimes because they're mushier, I like to cook sweet potatoes separate and then add them into the sauce at the very end. So now my stock has come up to a boil, right? My whole sauce here. And what I need to do is I need to turn this off, and I'm going to wait a second till some of this steam escapes, and we're going to cover this with foil. Now, if you have like a Le Creuset pot, you can just put a lid right on top. You know, most of us don't have them. But taking the foil and putting it on the pot, and then making sure that it's wrapped and sealed. When I put this in the oven, it's creating a closure so that all the steam that's inside here is going to stay inside here while it cooks. So I want to, you know, make this just one nice little bundle of a pot.
Chef,
Yes.
it's Lynn. I apologize. We're only up to the red wine. What do we, I just put it in.
So you want to let your red wine boil until it doesn't smell like alcohol anymore. So when you smell it, you should have no burning feeling in here. And once that happens, that takes a few minutes. Then you add your veal stock, and you're at this point here where we're wrapped.
About 10 minutes?
Not even. I mean, if it's at a boil, it should take about 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Mine is all real time. What's happening here? So that's how, you know, it took just a few minutes for mine to stop.
Well, we're cooking. We're cooking too, Chef.
Well, excuse me.
No. We're cooking two. We're cooking 2 ribs.
Got it.
So a little slower pace.
No worries.
They look wonderful.
They smell great. This is one of the best things to come home and smell too. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put this in the 300-degree oven while you guys are catching up.
Goes in the oven back there. We're in the kitchen tour also.
Yeah.
We didn't need the extra.
I think it's ready to go in. Just put it off and let it rest for a couple minutes before we put it together. So I think we should do that.
You want to cook it down a little. That's still a lot of pepper in there. It says you don't want to poach it.
Take your time. You don't want to rush braising. Braising is a slow, gentle technique, and you know it's got so much history behind it because, you know, most peasant cooking includes this technique: braising, smoking, anything like that, because the peasants used to get the cheap, tough cuts of meat, the hocks, the briskets, all this. Well, the rich people had the tenderloins and the beautiful steaks. So historically, there's a ton of heart and soul into braising. That's what I love about it. Is it's just that grassroots kind of cooking, that home style cooking. So it takes time.
Chef,
Yes,
bring the veal stock to a boil and then wrap it, right?
that's correct.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm gonna put the lid on it. I wanna show it to him first. There's a show and tell.
Oh, the best way to do that is to.
Yeah. Hey, Chef,
Yes, sir.
I wanna show you my lid for my pot here.
All right, let's go to Mr. Beam.
This is a cast iron lid. I haven't used it in a few years. I had to kind of clean it up and oil it a little. I've had this in the oven because it weighs about 5 pounds, just a
Yeah,
lid.
no, see, and that'll work great. That's going to create that kind of seal you want. That's going to let
Yeah,
the
we have-
steam capture in there.
Yeah, we have the same one here, the cast iron top.
Perfect. Those are fantastic.
Yeah.
Used to the same way.
Dutch oven.
It's back in the kitchen.
Yeah.
All right.
Chef,
Yes.
can you do this in the future in a Dutch oven?
I beg your pardon?
Can you do it in a Dutch oven?
Yeah, you absolutely can. You can even do this in a crock pot, but if you want to make sure you have a great one, you want to get that good initial sear first. Whereas a crock pot, you just kind of throw everything in. You can use the crock pot as your slow cooker to do this, but you want to get that good sear. You want to do the vegetables right, and then just use that as your cooking tool.
So a Dutch oven would work.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna Instapot this next time because you can sear in that.
Yep.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah, a lot of people use Instapot for braises. They love it.
Hey, Chef,
Yes.
she's very concerned that we got leftover pieces.
So that's the vinegar. We're going to get to that next.
Oh, good, okay. I was like, oh no, we didn't use all the parts.
Nope, you're good. So I just took mine out of the oven. Okay.
What?
We're going to take a look at this.
Oh, yeah.
Now, here's the big trick. When you first open your lid on your short rib, there's going to be steam releasing. So be aware, you don't want to get a steam burn. That's never fun. And if I put my meat fork in here, it gently pulls away from it. Okay, and that's what I want. That means that it's tender. It's going to fall apart. So what I do at this point is you don't want to take your short rib and pull it right out, because what's going to happen is I take it out, it's releasing steam, and steam is moisture. We don't want to lose this moisture. So I'm going to let this sit for about 5 minutes or so and let the short rib relax inside here and absorb some of that juice. And then we'll pull it out to finish the sauce. Obviously, and against my better judgment, I'm doing that right now because we're moving along here. But if I was making this at home, I would let the short rib sit in here 5-10 minutes until the sauce relaxes, the proteins in the muscle relax, and it absorbs some of what it needs to do. So this sauce now, if you see the vegetables, they're super tender. I mean, this is my favorite part of any braise, is the carrots in there. I love it. So I'm going to bring this to a boil and start to reduce this down. What I'm looking to do at this point is all the natural gelatins that are in this stock, I want them to start to come together. I want to reduce the amount of water in there that we needed to cook this to give you that really phenomenal rich sauce. Now what's going to happen is when that happens, when you eat it, it's going to coat your mouth. Just a fantastic coating. But it also leaves a sappiness to it, and that's what the vinegar is for. So vinegar reacts with your taste buds very similar to how salt does, but it'll also cut through the fat of the sauce, the richness of it. So once this comes down to where we want it to be, we're going to add this splash of vinegar, and that's going to really balance out our sauce and let it dance beautifully on your tongue instead of just being too rich and just too like heavy to eat. This is going to make it actually very light for a short rib, which is good. So at this point, it's just a hard boil. I want to bring this down. I want to reduce it.
Takes the meat out. Where did he put the meat?
I just put the meat on the side for now. That's all.
Thank you.
Jeff,
Yes.
can you, I know we can cover our pot with aluminum foil, but can we just put a cover on it?
Yeah. So if it's a good cover, that's a nice heavy cover, absolutely. That's great. That's better than foil because it's easier to work with and you can just take it off a lot easier. You don't have to, you can take it off and step back as opposed to having to peel the foil and get burned like I always do. So this one's been cooking for about an hour and a half. And that's what we want. That's the time we want. I could take this and technically pull it and it's going to shred apart. But if I hold it up too, it's also holding apart. It's got that perfect amount of breakdown on it that I'm looking for. That's just a little bit of resistance where I like when I eat a short rib where I need a bit of a knife, but I don't want it to just fall apart and be mush. But if I take a fork, like my meat fork, I can shred it. Some people like it where you don't need a knife at all and you just take a fork and press through it. And that's great. And all you got to do is just cook it a little bit longer. So you can control the texture of your short rib. Now, my sauce is going to keep boiling down here while you guys are working. And then we'll get to the final part of it. Any questions up to this point?
Beautiful.
No, we're just hungry.
Lynn, I love your apron.
Yeah, it smells good.
Oh, thank you.
Kitchen smells amazing.
And it smells so good. Wait till a little bit when this is braising for a while. You walk out of the room and you come back in and you're just like, oh my goodness. I mean, it smells like a phenomenal restaurant.
Everybody in my condo is going to be totally jealous. I can tell you
Good.
that.
Yeah, but it's super easy. So here's the thing with this process. The braising process is a technique and you can apply it to almost any protein you want. Certain fish to an extent too, like a bone-in monkfish tail, but if I was braising lamb shanks, I do the exact same process. If I was braising, basically anything, if I was braising a chuck roast, anything like that, I would do the same process. So all you really change is the liquid and essentials that you're putting in the pan, but it's still a sear, still a caramelization of vegetables, still a deglazing, and still adding liquid. So if I were to do I used to do a braised beef or a braised lamb shank, and I loved it. It was phenomenal. The only difference with this was I added a touch more tomato to the sauce and threw a cinnamon stick in there. And when it braised, it was just this amazing Greek lamb. I mean, I love it. It's just, again, still by knowing this technique, you can research and do so many different dishes and recipes.
Well, I think that's a great technique, the half sauce, because I think I always would think to put more sauce, cover it.
Right.
So so this is the first time it's a good tip. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and it's gonna take some getting used to, but when you can do this and you can master something like this technique, or like when we did the fish searing class or the steak cooking class, you can apply that to anything you're cooking at home, and it just kind of expands what you're doing, and it makes it a little more, other recipes a little more approachable. So let's take a look in my pot here. All right. Now my sauce is starting to thicken up, and I can see that because my bubbles are getting bigger, right? As the steam escapes from here and the sauce is getting thicker, the bubbles get larger. What I want to do occasionally is just give this a stir to make sure none of these vegetables are burning at the bottom of the pan. And once this gets about to the consistency I want, where I want it to be that rich sauce. Now, if I want it soupier, I could stop here and be done with it and have a delicious short rib. If I want it to be a little bit richer and kind of glaze the short rib, I just continue to take it down.
Too much.
So
Goes down a little bit.
Oh, so it puts it back in.
So when it gets closer to this consistency I want, I put the short rib in, and I just like to glaze it a little. It's just a preference of mine. But what I'm also going to do now is I'm going to add the vinegar. So
That's when you add the vinegar.
this is when you add the vinegar, because I encourage all you to taste it at this point. And what you're going to taste is just this really awesome, really rich sauce. And you're going to be like, wow, that's good, but you can't eat more than 2 bites. You just can't. So adding that little splash of vinegar, and you're not going to need all this. It's going to be to your liking. I like a lot of vinegar, but a teaspoon would go a long way. And now you see the sauce is really coming together. And it's getting that real rich brown color and that darkness to it. And it's, I mean, it just opens up the smell. If I wanted to add herbs, right, I would add the herbs at this point because I love fresh pops of herbs. So if I'm gonna add rosemary to this, I'd add rosemary now and let that rosemary fragrance beautifully, as opposed to putting it in the beginning and letting it muddle and get a little bit of bitterness to it. I'd add it at this very end and just have the brightest rosemary flavor around. But that, again, is just to what you like. So I'm going to continue to crunch this down for a second, and we'll get start talking about the plate of this.
But when you say that, do you mean fresh rosemary?
I'm talking fresh.
Yeah. Oh, that looks good.
Chef, about how long did that sauce boil before you put the meat back in it?
You know, until it got to about the consistency I wanted to. Every stove and every pan is going to be different, so it's going to make a difference. But once it got about to where I wanted it, then I added the beef in.
Got it.
Okay.
Now, if you look at my sauce and I take this with all these vegetables and everything, and I pour it right over the top, and that is a thick, gorgeous sauce. And there's no thickening agent. It's literally, it's thick from the gelatin of the actual bones when we made the broth, and then just the rich gelatin inside the short rib. So that's what makes this dish so great, and that's what makes the braising technique so great is that you know, your sauce is a result of the quality you put into it. If you braise anything with a bone in it, you're gonna get an even better sauce. But you look at this sauce, I mean, that's delicious. It's really, so in about an hour, you guys will be able to do it too. Should we stay on the call for an hour and you guys watch me eat this while you're
wait,
getting done?
I only live 2 blocks away. I'll be over.
Yeah, right.
In the freezer, frozen.
Oh, good. I know.
So, are there any other questions?
Wow, that looks so good.
Chef, we have a question from Facebook. Was
Yes?
it just a basic red wine vinegar that you used?
Yep, just a standard red wine vinegar. And depending on what I'm braising, changes what type of vinegar I'm using. So, like that lamb dish I was telling you about, I use sherry vinegar. And when I braise pork, a lot of times I'll use apple cider vinegar. It's just about the flavor you kind of want to incorporate in there. But yeah, just standard red wine vinegar. Sometimes, by the way, balsamic, awesome with short ribs. That splash of balsamic vinegar,
Isn't that interesting? Okay.
yeah, it gives a great flavor.
Chef,
Yes,
I am leaving tonight. I will make this tomorrow night.
awesome.
This was beautiful.
Thank you.
Molto grazie.
Prego, grazie a lei.
Hey, Chef, what about the broth?
What's
Yeah.
that?
What about the broth? How do we, if we were going to do this on our own, you know, to make roast or something, how do we do the broth?
So, okay, there's two things you can do. If you're going to buy it, buy beef broth. Don't buy beef stock. Buy beef stock. Don't buy beef broth. Take that back. Beef broth has a bunch of salt and seasoning. Beef stock is just the straight bones and vegetables and tomatoes, and that's it. So that's one way you could do it. The other way is you get beef bones and you roast them, and then you put them in a pot with carrots, celery, onions, garlic, tomato, and water, and you let that go for about between 12 and 24 hours, just a very light simmer, and then strain it and boil it down, and then you have your beef broth, your beef stock. I keep calling it broth.
What kind of bones? What kind of bones?
So they sell beef stock bones, and normally they're knuckle bones, they're femur bones, things like that. Anything that has a lot of marrow within is going to give you a great stock.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chef.
Guys, thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
Thanks,
All right.
Chef.
Have a
Bye,
wonderful
Chef.
night.
Yes,
Enjoy your
thank you.
short ribs. Thank you.
Thank
I'll see you all
you.
later.
You too. Sam.
Bye.
Bye.